Hello. Welcome to Raising and Regulating Podcast. Today's conversation is for the mom who is doing all the right things and quietly feels like something is still just missing. So, I am joined by Sophia Hyde, a certified master life coach, author of Unleash Your Favorite Self, host of the Your Favorite Self podcast, and creator of the Favorite Self app. So, after years of struggling with overwhelm, guilt, and the weight of chasing her own standards that were never hers to begin with, Sophia discovered that most of us are just walking through life chasing the wrong goals. So, definition of success handed to us by society, culture, religion, family, or media. Her work is all about helping women shed those shoulds and finally build a life that they actually love. So, she lives in Blue Ridge Mountains with her husband and two children, where she watches the sunrise with her coffee and closes out her evenings with fireflies and her bunnies, which I just love that. So, today we are diving into what really takes to stop chasing someone else's life and start building your own self concept, ending people pleasing, lightening the mental load, and giving yourself permission to design a life that you generally love. So, this conversation is going to be super warm, grounded, and just so freeing. So, Sophia, I'm so honored to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm here.
Let's get started with just a little background. Obviously, I shared a little bit about where you're located and your children, but love to kind of hear like how you got to, into life coaching and how you got to where you are today, and anything else that you would love to share about yourself and your human design, because obviously that's what I love here.
So I'll just kick off with that so that those who are listening and love human design can have that in mind as you hear my story. I am a generator, 5-1, with emotional authority, and I love human design. I use it with all of my clients because it has worked 100% of the time so far. Like, it's just so powerful. So I love that you teach that. As far as my story goes, I kind of fell into entrepreneurship when I was 20 years old. I didn't know that it was what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I was in college and my boss, I wanted to be my dream in life. I was like yearbook girl from 7th grade, middle school, high school. I was Mrs. Yearbook. So I was going to be an editor of a magazine in New York City. Life like presented this incredible opportunity for me straight out of high school to become the editor of the local community magazine. I had my dream job. I was like, I'm an editor of a magazine at 18. This is amazing. And 2 years into that, my boss was like, I think you'd be better at sales. And I personally realized that I hated being an editor because essentially it's a glorified adult babysitter. I was like, oh my God, this is awful. Turns out I hate being a manager. He offered me this sales job and I was 20. And that's also at the same time that I met my husband at 18 and we got married when I was 20 years old. And so the day I got back from my honeymoon, which was spring break sophomore year of college, I entered into my new sales job. And it was 100% commission. And I tripled my income in 90 days. And that was when I was like, I think I like this. And then so for context, I turned 40 in a few months. And so that was 20 years ago, which feels really crazy because I don't feel like an old lady
Yeah,
to be able to say that. So
you're not an old lady by any
yeah,
means.
I know, but it's like 20 years ago I had
But
this
a
job.
20
It
years gap,
feels
yeah.
very weird to talk
Yeah.
in that language. But shortly after that, I had always loved photography. I got a real camera, and then people started paying me to take their pictures and do their weddings. And then my husband graduated with his film degree, and suddenly we're like, I'm an entrepreneur. I left the magazine to run a photo and video business with my husband, and then we're like winning awards and doing all this stuff and like building this business. And that was an interesting season filled with so many life lessons. That was when I, started getting those entrepreneur experiences of like doing it right and doing it wrong. And I learned so much through my first job at the magazine with like sales and learning how to talk to people and communicate. But it was also so cool since I sold advertising in a local level. I met all these small business owners and I didn't get diagnosed till I was 34 with ADHD. In retrospect, it was the pattern recognition part of my brain. I could tell upon the first time I met that entrepreneur if that small business was going to be there in 6 months. Like I started making it a game at the office, which sounds terrible that you're like betting on people's lives, but I would go sit down. I'd be like, they're going to be successful. And I'd be like, they'll be closed in 90 days. And I was always right because my pattern recognition started noticing like behaviors and ways of moving through the world that the people who were making it had in common and the people who were having to close up shop just like didn't have their stuff together. Right. And
Mhm.
so I was in the business world and learning all this stuff. And then in my own business, so we did photography and video and weddings, I was suffering. And so what happened was there was a period of time where I tried to do both at the same time. I had a full-time job, and evenings and weekends I was doing weddings, and I hit burnout at 24 years old. So in my book, I tell this story of how I was 24 years old and I had this like spiritual aha, like divine intervention moment. It was very spiritual experience. I saw this woman who was me, but not me, who like lived inside of me and wanted to come out, but she like couldn't. She was like trapped inside. I was like inspired to write all these notes about her, like who she was, but I didn't have anything in common with her. And I was like, how do I find her? And then it was this moment of like, you need to do a sabbatical. And so I told my boss at the magazine, I need to take a sabbatical. I need a week off. Can I do it next week? He was like, he was cool. He was so cool. I think he is the reason I figured out I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I grew up, because I like wanted his job. I was like, oh, I want to own the company.
Mhm.
And so he was like, sure, I think that's a great idea. And I told my husband, babe, I need you to leave the house for a week and bring the 3 cats with you. And so
You had him leave?
I did, because I was always on the go. I always was meeting people for coffee, meeting you for lunch, going up here,
Yeah.
travel. If there's any listeners here who are Enneagrams, I was an Enneagram 7. And in your unhealth, you're like over planning, over scheduling, over traveling because you're just like go, 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 go. And in my mid 20s, I was maximizing all the adventures. So all the friend dates, all the things. This was pre-kids.
Mhm.
And it was too much. And so my soul was just like craving to stop. And I was like, I am on the go all the time. I want to be home and I want to sit in the quiet. And so I heard of people having silent retreats. I was like, I'm going to sit in silence for a week and see what happens. That was what I just felt like this divine calling to do. And God bless my husband. He did. He took all 3 cats to our friend's house and stayed with them for a week. And I had the house to myself. And that's when I decided I was going to learn meditation. And I sat on a pillow and did the fingers things and nothing happened and I couldn't concentrate. And so I reached out to an old college professor who had since retired. I like scrolled back through the 2011 Facebook messages and I like had sent him a message on Facebook and was like, hey, I remember that you used to talk all the time about meditating and I heard you're retired now. And like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And like, would you teach me? And he was like, come to the house. And he like sent me his address. And so one of the days of my sabbatical, I like spent at my professor's house as he like taught me how to meditate. And I really believe like that was the beginning. I share that to say like, how did you become a life coach? Okay. That was the fork in the road moment, that sabbatical, because that was when everything changed. And in my book, I tell the whole story of he taught me how to like find your purpose. And I did the exercise that he taught me. I also started learning how to sit in the quiet, what that means, moving through like he encouraged me to first like define my value system and just start by every day sitting in the quiet and asking myself, like going through each of my values and reflecting on, am I living according to this? And I just started sitting there and being like, did I operate from a place of love today? And then like, when you feel like you're out of your own integrity, reflect on that. And that's how he taught me to begin my meditation practice. And that really started realigning my life so that I started seeing everything through my own value systems. And during that sabbatical, I had this girlfriend who like, in her house, she had a vision board. I'd never heard of them before, but like she had like the magazine clippings. And I was like, that looks cool. I had never taken a workshop. I had just saw that on some girlfriend's wall, but I was sitting in my house for a week. And so I was like, I'm going to make one of those. And so I asked myself the question, if I died today, what would I be disappointed never happened?
Mm.
And I just sat with a sheet of paper and answered each of those questions. Some of them were really small things, like I want my nose pierced. But I worked in that small town magazine I told you about was a very conservative, like Southern Baptist culture down in Florida. That's where I grew up. And so it was not the place that like you could run around and sell ads to small business owners with their nose piercing. So that felt very rebellious.
Yeah.
So some of them were really small like that. And others were really, really big. And I still have those. What I did was I wrote them down and then I found pictures on Google Images and sent them to CVS to get developed. And then I just stuck them on a corkboard with pins. One of them said, and it's wild to me because I'm like 2011. I remembered writing down full-time job that helps others grow. But a few years ago, I went and actually found the thing and it did say that a full-time job helping others grow. But then I had 4 flowers was like the picture I picked. It had 4 flowers. And this blows my mind. I wrote author, blogger, life coach, speaker. In 2011,
Were there even life coaches? I mean, there were,
life
but it
coaches
wasn't even.
was not even a heard of industry. So there's been 2 people I've learned the most from coaching who have are like mentors in my world. I love the work of Brooke Castillo, and she started her podcast in 2014 when And she talks about how when she started, no one knew what a life coach was. She refers to 2014 as being a rare industry. I'm like, where the hell did that come from in 2011? But whatever, I did. That's what I wrote down. 6 months after that sabbatical, I quit my full-time job and went full-time with the photography and the video with my husband. In retrospect, I knew I was like stressed and not that good at certain parts of it. In retrospect, it was my undiagnosed ADHD. So I was like bombing at the bookkeeping, bombing at the editing. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. I'm not good at this. Like I was great at the pictures, great at the people. And in retrospect, I just needed a little bit of like my meds to help me focus long enough to edit a wedding. But I had a really hard time. And so I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot see myself being 40 years old photographing weddings. This is not my life's calling. So then I got into health kick, and then I was like helping people get healthy. And I was like a health coach, and I was broke. We lost everything because my husband was like, I hate weddings. And I was like, yeah, me too. I'm going to do health coach, and he's going to go into film and commercial work. And then we both like put all the eggs in the basket of leaving weddings, which was our moneymaker, to like start new things. And that's when we also got pregnant. And so then we short sold the condo, moved in with my parents. I had a newborn baby, and we couldn't afford to support ourselves. And my parents were like, when are you getting a job? When are you getting a job? When are you getting a job? And I was like, I just had no peace about it. I was like, no, we're entrepreneurs. And I was like, but you're not making any money. You can't support yourself. What's happening? I put the ugliest parts in the book because you know what? When people want to like sell courses on how to be an entrepreneur, how to have a business, or how to do a course, you have to understand that when you see someone's success, when you see someone who's made it, I've never met a single entrepreneur who doesn't have a really effing messy middle. And so, yes, I'm going to get to the part where I am living this beautiful life in our dream home with a mountain view where I drink my coffee and have my bunnies. And we have truly made what we wanted. But I can't tell you that if you ourselves. But then when she was 3 days old, somebody offered us a free house.
3 days. That's kind of an
I
interesting
had
timeline.
no peace. So the whole time I'm pregnant, my mom was like, what's y'all's plan? Who's going to get a job? When are you going to get a job? And I was like, Mom, I just have this feeling that I just need to get through this pregnancy. I need to focus on the health of me and the baby, and then I'll know what to do. And my mom does not move through the world the way that I do. Like, could not make this make sense in her brain as like, essentially we're like freeloading off of her. And I'm 27, he's 29, and we can't support ourselves. And so it's like made no sense to her. But I was like, I've always just been a very spiritual person and just trusted that. And now that I know so much about human design, I'm like, oh, I'm emotional authority. If it doesn't feel right, I just got to follow what feels right, even when it doesn't make logical sense. And I've always trusted that even before I had that language. And so I had no peace about anything. I was like, I just feel like I'm going to know what to do after the baby comes. So we get offered a free house. I don't want to take up the story. It was the aunt was dying, and the family wanted to keep it in the home, but nobody lived there, and they were going to lose the insurance, and they just needed somebody who would take care of it. And they were like, just make our lives easier by just like moving in there. Well, it was 2 blocks from my parents' house. My mother-in-law from Tennessee had a friend who lived 2 hours away that coincidentally his aunt had a house in my parents' neighborhood. It was when you talk about the magic of the universe and divine intervention, I truly feel like when you're in flow, when you are listening to that divine guidance, magic happens. And so like when I'm working with my clients, of course we work on strategy. I'm not stupid. We don't make like illogical plans, but nothing trumps. When you tell me that you just feel like this is the right thing to do, I will always trust it. I have a client in severe overwhelm. There is a lot happening in her life. And then she comes to a call and she tells me that she thinks she needs to get a puppy. And I have a dog, but I'm very stressed by dogs and the barking. And like, to me, that is like a terrible idea by all logical standards, but she couldn't shake it. And she just felt like a big piece about it. And I said, logically, girlfriend, getting a puppy with all this happening in your life doesn't make sense. But if your intuition is telling you that puppy that your friend has belongs to you, like nothing's going to trump that. And it's been the best thing because it's brought her this like emotional regulation and like and like she's getting through the overwhelm because she has a puppy, whereas the puppy would send me on like a mental health crisis, right? So it's like we each have our own things, right? I will always trust your intuition above what makes sense on paper, right?
Yeah, that's what I always think of like AI, like these days. Like, you go there, like everybody, I feel like a lot of people go there and like, want the answers, but it's like, I feel like you have to tap in, like be like, is this
Yes,
truly it? You know what I mean? So I feel like it's like life in general, but like just a example of like trusting your intuition with like that's a
100%.
big fad right now. So
So all of this is happening. This is 2014 that my daughter's born and we move into this house. Well, my daughter was 6 months old. My husband had walked away from weddings because he wanted to be a filmmaker. And what was
Mhm.
happening is when people would ask him to be on projects, he was already contracted to be there for a bride. You can't tell a bride, "Never mind, I got a cooler gig. I'm backing out of your wedding." And so the weddings were actually killing our dreams. That was why we were like, "We have to get out of this industry. It's killing." The whole reason we got into this was for him to be a filmmaker. He's a cinematographer. And it was like, this is backfiring, right? That was why it was like, we have to get out of this, even though it did not make financial sense, right? Well, my daughter was 6 months old when he got offered his first feature. And he has now shot, I've lost count. I think he's somewhere around 12, 13, 14, 15, like up in there. We don't count anymore. Like he's in the industry. It all came together, but it was tight. Don't get me wrong. In 2014, 2015, 2016, we were broke AF. So I'm not saying like it was easy. It was really, really messy, but we like trusted that. And so when you're like, how did you become a life coach? Well, this is all part of the story and why it's like such a loaded thing, because there was a part of me in 2011 that knew this is where I wanted to be, but also my life was a hot mess. You can't be in my brain. I'm like, I can't even support my family. Like I need to get my shit together before I can be guiding somebody else. Right.
Mhm.
And so I felt completely and wholly unqualified to be a life coach until I had something to offer. And so I just felt like I was on my journey and like there would come a time that I was a life coach, but I was learning the lessons that needed to be learned, right? Book is about how to do this for yourself and all the lessons that were learned, and they're all in the story. They're all in there. But ultimately, like one thing after another occurred. And then I knew like long term, the health coaching, it was so discouraging because I would watch people transform the way they felt in their bodies while working with me, whether it was 30, 60, or 90 days. And then I'd see them a year later, 2 years later. And it's like they forgot everything. And that's so discouraging to feel like you're really changing people's lives and making a difference. And then for it to not stick. And I was like, once again, I'm like, I cannot keep doing this. Just like with the whole weddings. And like, it was just like, I can't keep doing this. And then had this breakdown moment. I could still see myself. I was on a bike, bicycling, and I have changed my life 3 times that were like, I feel like the whole world shifted because I got so angry that I screamed from a deep pit of rage. So I remember being on a bike and being so angry. It was 2016. We're like trying so hard to chase these goals and nothing's working out and we're broke and like trying to figure out like how to like pay for our basic lives. And I just couldn't keep going anymore, but I didn't have the clear answers. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm on this bike and I'm angry and I just roared with this deep rage from the pit of my stomach. And 2 days later, somebody told me about a job opportunity in town for a nonprofit down the street that I was literally like divinely perfect for with my personality, my strengths, and my experience. And it was to go work for the local chamber of commerce. But remember, this is the same community where I had spent 7 years selling the meds, right? And
Mhm.
people. And I had all the relationships, but I also had the entrepreneur experience. And I had a weird title, but essentially my job was like event planner and also COO for all the operations. And I was really like perfect for it. One of my good friends had become the president, and I called her and I was like, I want this job. She was like, Sophia, you're so overqualified for that job. And I was like, I know, but I want the job. And she's like, I'll hire you on a temp basis. I don't want them to think that I like gave it to a friend, but also we're dying and we need help. So come on Monday, start the job, but we'll do it on like a temporary thing because I do have to like ethically like post this and interview people. And I'm like, cool, sounds good. So obviously I got the job. So I did that for 4 years. And I say that because if there's anybody listening who wants to be a business owner or is struggling, one of the best things I ever did on my entrepreneur journey was go get a job. And so I also think that sometimes in entrepreneur spaces, people can be really hard on themselves as if like jobs are a bad thing. And because I got that job, it paid the bills. It took all the financial stress off of our lives. And it allowed me to check in and check out. Also, it forced me to put my daughter into childcare, which made me a better mom. And so when my second son came along, he went into childcare at 7 weeks and I had no stress about it. When I had my kid in 2014, I was still dabbling in photography because I had clients, I had weddings, like people were still coming to me for that while I'm trying to do this health coaching. So I'm like trying to run these two businesses and have a kid at home because I had these stories of how daycare is bad. And it was too much. I was drowning. It was not good. I don't recommend it. And the best thing that ever happened was that I put my kid in full-time daycare. And I realized how much better of a mom I became when she went to full-time daycare because then I had these boundaries, these hours. These are the hours you work. And I was present and I was in my home and I wasn't distracted. And I mothered her better. And while she was in daycare, she was getting entertainment and stimulation and education, where I was just trying to entertain her some way, shape, or form so I could make the next phone call or reply to the next email. And so the best thing I ever did was put her in childcare. And that made it so much easier for me to hand an infant over. And so it's not for everybody, but I will tell you help. And I'm not meant to be at home. It was the worst my mental health ever was. And so I took that job and then I was able to rest. So like evenings and weekends, that creative side of my brain could come back online. And I was able to take all the money that I did make from the people I still helped with the coaching, the health coaching, the people I did still get some shoots and some weddings. And all that money, instead of it going to our bills were covered. All that money was going straight to paying off all of our debt. And so by 2019, we were completely debt free and had a second kid. And it really turned our finances around. So then we started building the savings. I finally like felt like I had my life together enough that I'm like, okay, that coaching thing, I think I can actually entertain it. So in 2019, while I still had that full-time job, I was breastfeeding a baby, had a full-time job, had a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and that's when I started coach training. So I found a program that I could do it with like some flexibility. And
Mhm.
so I was using like evenings and weekends. I remember listening, I couldn't be on the calls live. And I remember doing almost all my coach training between 11 and midnight after the kids were in bed. And I'm like watching the videos and filling out the worksheets and sending the stuff in. So I went through coach training in 2019. I was supposed to start in 2020, but the pandemic hit and I worked for a chamber of commerce and I felt like I needed to be there to serve the small business community. It was not time to quit. And so I stayed through the pandemic. And then in 2021, I left. I gave my notice, but I had built up this safety net, right? Like the first time I quit on a whim. This time when I quit, we had like 50% of my salary sitting in a savings account. And my husband was still working. He was making enough to cover our bills. And the risk didn't like bottom our family out. Like the last
Mhm.
big risk. And
Mhm.
so I started my coaching full time in 2021 and just started building and growing and learning all those lessons along the way. I wrote my book because there were tools and resources that I had used to change my life and transform my own life that I couldn't find somewhere to recommend. So I kept looking for the book to recommend. Oh, but you learn this concept, learn that concept. Where do I see people to learn this stuff? And I was like really, really frustrated that I couldn't find the tool to teach them. And then I had this like another one of the spiritual divine moments where I'm like, oh, the book doesn't exist because you're supposed to write it. It came out in 2023 and I spent 2022 and 2023 writing it, which feels like really early to be like, you are Brandon. How'd you even know what you were talking about? Yeah, dude, that was 20 years of experience, right? Like that was most of those stories came through that like decade of me getting my life together, right? And then I also had all this proof and evidence of like how this stuff was helping people and was working. And what I had learned through my coach trainings and so I go through 10 areas on the life wheel. I call it the favorite life wheel. And so the book takes you through each of those. And there's something my husband said to me. He hates personal growth and development. Like he hates all like growth books. This is what he says. And I had his voice in my head when I read the book. He was like, the thing I hate about these books, because I would make him read them. I'd be like, this book will change your life. It's amazing. And he was like, he would say, Sophia, all I need to do is read the first chapter. He's like, these personal growth books, you read the first chapter, they say the concept that they're wanting to teach, and then they just spend the rest of the book like double downing and proving whatever their concept thing is. So all you need to do is read the first chapter. That's the point they're trying to make. Move on. I don't see the point. So my book, you cannot do that. Not one of the chapters teaches you anything any of the other chapters taught you. Like, because they all go through 10 different areas of life. So, finances, your self care, your relationship with your body, your relationship with your family, how you view like the generational work that we're each doing. Every single chapter is like a standalone novella, right? They all together is how you unleash your favorite self, but individually, like you have to read every chapter to get the lesson out from each one of them. Because I had him in my head, and I was like, if people are going to read this, it needs to be valuable. They need to not feel like they wasted their time. At the same time that was happening, my husband and I were growing more and more and more and more dissatisfied. We had never actually loved living in Florida. Right after college, we wanted to move to LA, but we graduated college in 09, peak recession, industry was suffering. Like financially, I had this like well-paying sales job, right? So like we could not make it work. The doors got slammed in our face when I was pregnant with my daughter and we were broke. We were like, we need to move to Atlanta. That's where the film industry is. And he spent 3 weeks living with a cousin up there trying to like figure out what to do. And he was basically told like, you have to be union to come up here, but you can't be union until you get a job as a cinematographer. Okay. He wanted to go up as a cinematographer in the union, but couldn't until he got a union job. But you can't get a union job without being in the union. So if we go up there, we're not going to get any work because he's not a union cinematographer. But he can become a union cinematographer until he gets on a union job. So it was this whole like, so we felt trapped. We're like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to make this work. And
Yeah.
so that's why we just stayed. And so we kept trying to leave Florida. We never like saw ourselves being like, we want to live in Florida. And then after the pandemic, Florida's culture really changed and we already felt like we didn't belong. And then, and I know people have their own different political views, and so I don't want to like isolate anybody, but we did not fit into Ron DeSantis culture. It was becoming more and more and more like we don't belong here. We lived in a rural community known as the winter strawberry capital of the world that was like all these beautiful strawberry fields. And because of policies and different things happening in trade agreements, all of the strawberry fields have been one by one being sold and turned into giant warehouses because it's Central Florida. So you're like right in the middle of commerce. And
Mhm.
so our rural town was turning into a literal concrete jungle. Like you name the brand, they have a 50,000 square foot warehouse in my hometown. And so we were like, this is terrible. And my husband said something that was so powerful, which I have to share this because I think some of your listeners will resonate with what he said. We wanted to leave, and his family lives in East Tennessee. And we were like, let's just go live by your family instead of living by my family. And I said, we ended up deciding on West North Carolina because it's more of our vibe and has more access to arts and the kind of education we want for our kids. East Tennessee does not invest in the arts. And so we were like, we need to be, where we want to raise our kids. And the choice was made in 2022, but we made a 3-year plan so my daughter could finish 5th grade. And it also gave me 3 years to become the primary income earner for the family through my business. And he said something that's so powerful because there is no film industry here, right? He would get probably like 1 or 2 features a year, but he paid the bills with commercial work. One day jobs shooting for whether it was the Tampa Bay Lightning or the University of Florida or whatever. He was, ESPN here and there. Like he was going all around the state shooting one day jobs and then would get occasional features. And that really provided for our family. And he moving to West North Carolina, the commerce isn't there. Like he would need to be in Charlotte or Raleigh to have like the access to the commercial work. But he really wanted to be in the mountains, which by the way, he kept saying he needs to be in the mountains. We later found out that in human design, he has a mountain for his environment. He just kept saying that he's like, no, I don't need to look at the mountains. I need to be in the mountains. Well,
Yeah.
people with the mountain authority
What are
need to be at
yours?
a higher elevation. I am Shores.
Okay.
Yeah, I am Shores. And so we made this 3-year plan to move to the West North Carolina mountains. I said, okay, babe, this is your last chance if we make this move. Like, do you want to look at Atlanta? Like if we move there, your career you will have less access to the networking and everything like that. And he said, here's the thing, Sophia. Like every parent wants to give their kid a better childhood than they had. And I grew up camping and playing in creeks and being outside, and our kids hate Florida is hot. And so he's like, our kids don't even like going outside 6 months of the year. And he said, I want my kids to play outside. I want my kids to have the kind of experiences I had. And he said, there's no way when I'm an old man sitting in a rocker that I'm going to look back and be like, man, I wish I could have gotten that Netflix series. I could have been a DP on that movie. He said,
Mhm.
but I do see myself getting to the end of the life and saying, I only had one chance to give them a childhood, and that's not the one I wanted them to have. And he said, that would be a worse regret to live with. We were like, okay, we got to do this. And so we made a 3-year plan. And we put a lot of investment into my business so that I could grow to the point that I could be the primary income earner. And last year we decided we had equity in our house, and we said, no matter what, we're going to move after 5th grade, because between 5th and 6th grade is a great transition for my daughter because she's going to have to start all over anyways, right? And so we said, we're doing it June of 2025. We're moving no matter what. And the worst case scenario is we'll take the equity out of the house. And if we have to rent a trailer and live it, we're just getting out of here, and we will just rent the cheapest thing that we can find if it gets us to the mountains, but we're just getting out of here and we'll figure it out from there. And we did. We were able to buy a house up here, and it's like that could be another 20-minute story of how we should not have been able to afford the house that we have, but all these weird circumstances came together in this crazy way, and we got a house that originally listed for like 585, and we got it for 425, and it's all because of these weird things that it should have been a 585 house. So anyways, we moved to our dream home. We will probably die in this house. There's really no reason to ever leave. I can see the mountains and the sunrise and the sunset. Like we live in a bird sanctuary. So like we have bird feeders, and like I wake up to the literal sound of birds in my windows. It's incredible.
Asheville and Sedona are like the 2 places in North America that my lines, like, recommend that I live
You know,
there.
they're both very spiritual places. Sedona is a
Right.
very spiritual place. You know, I will tell you, I know we are exactly where we belong. I cannot even tell you how insanely, like, I think, you know, there's a vibration in the air wherever you're at, right? And the vibrational frequency of where we are, we just attract the coolest people. I mean, the stories I could tell you of the fascinating people I've been able to meet since we met here. My daughter got over $6,000 in camp scholarships offered to her. So she's going to 5 weeks of sleepaway camp and
And you guys have
total.
only been there for a year, like,
We've been there
that's
for a
such a
year, but I'm
crazy
also very
thing.
like, I have a whole system. I had 3 years to plan, so I also made a strategic plan of how I was gonna build friends because community is so necessary for me to thrive,
What
and
what
I've
was the
been
plan?
it
Can
was
you
like a
give us, like,
business
a
plan. No, no, I,
snippet of
like, legit made a plan on how I was gonna rebuild communities, but I was raised Southern Baptist. My dad is still a deacon for the Southern Baptist Church. I could have been, like, the president of the youth group if you could, like, run for that. I was hardcore inside of evangelicalism, and then actually, around that same time of the whole meditation thing, like, when I started the more I listened to myself and got in tune with myself and communicated with the divine myself, the more, like, this system I was inside of made less and less sense, and it wasn't working for me, and it was, like, falling apart in my head, and by 2014, we had to, like, leave the church we were at. We'd helped plant a church, but we, like, left because it wasn't work just things were happening that just didn't work with our integrity system, then, and then the 2016 election occurred, and that just didn't that was just like the nail in the coffin. And so in the process of leaving evangelicalism, I lost community. Right? I
Mhm.
was raised in this town that, like, everybody asks you, "What's your name? What church do you go to?" That's how people get identified. And then I became, like, a really strong ally for the queer community because I saw so much of the damage of the system that I was inside of and how many people were harmed by it, that I became, like, a really outspoken ally. And between, like, my activism and then leaving the church and, like, naming the harm the church had done, essentially, I lost my whole community. Like, people who I thought would have been my friends till I was an old lady didn't want anything to do with me. I was being unfriended on Facebook. My own family, you know, I'm the only one who's left from my family. They're all still inside of it. And so I, like, didn't
Anybody
belong.
came back around?
Do what?
Has anybody came back around?
Well, they're all still very inside of the system, but there's been a lot. I've spent thousands of dollars on therapy and trauma coaching, and I've been able to heal those. There was some really, really ugly years there. I even had to go no contact for my parents are MAGA, and so, like, I had to go no contact for about 6 months for on part of the healing journey. So it was really ugly, really messy, really painful. But now those relationships are the healthiest that they've been since before I left the church. Genuinely, here's, like, the crazy part of that is nothing about any of them has changed. It was, like, me that changed. Like, so one of the things I had to realize was they never changed. So when I was angry and upset with all these things, like, it was me who was changing and they were just continuing to be who they'd always been. And I was the one who had changed, and I had to find the ability to forgive myself for who I had been before, and I had to find compassion and love for my past self so that I could release the judgment and the criticism that I was holding against them, so that I could find a way to show up in these relationships and hold unconditional love, because I was mad at being conditionally loved while I conditionally loved them. Right. And so I had to heal my relationship with myself so I could have the capacity to love them well. And I say that in a couple of quippy sentences, but the truth is that was ugly and painful. And there was a lot of tears and there was a lot of trauma rewiring. It was a process to get there. But now I'm able to show up in those relationships genuinely with unconditional love and allow those people in my life to be who they are and find the healthiest boundaries to protect myself and my children from what we're willing to be exposed to and not exposed to. And obviously, I think moving helps too. And so we were previously all in the same neighborhood. And so, but anyways, I lost community, right? The people I had grown up in youth group and I did things with them and I had been in churches, like, my whole network was built on churches. And when I left, the thing that is unique about that is they say it's all unconditional love, except it's on the condition you keep believing what we believe. And so when you don't believe what we believe, you don't actually fit into this community anymore because you broke the one sacred rule, which is we're united on the thing we all believe. And so I didn't realize it until, like, 5 years in, that what I spent 5 years going through was all the stages of grief and had to rebuild and make new friends. And I saw how unhealthy that was for me to lose community and how so much of my healing involved having it. So I knew when we chose to relocate our family to a town where we knew nobody at all, that I was going to have to make community quickly because it was like part of my ability to be my favorite self. My husband doesn't need it. He's got like 3 friends. They play video games together. He texts about fantasy football and he's got his wife and his 2 kids and he's like complete. He
What's
does
his human design?
manifesting generator 1-3. But I will say, if there's anybody who makes me have skepticism with human design, it's actually him because I'm convinced he is like 1,000% projector.
Well, that's what I thought you were gonna say whenever you were
He
explaining.
moves through the world like a projector in every way, shape, or form, but he is a Manny Gen. He was also born 2 weeks late. He has mom had gestational diabetes, and they didn't he wasn't born when he was supposed to be. I say it's worked 100% of the time with all of my clients. My husband moves through the world like a projector, but his date, time, birth, location stuff says Manny Gen. But he moves through the world like a projector. So I don't know what that is.
I wonder if it's some of his conditioning that kind of, like, sways him more that way though too?
He definitely is always experimenting though. Like
Like,
he has
multi-passionate.
even through film, even through that one story, he's like, I'm doing weddings, now I'm doing films. Now
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
doing
yeah.
film, now I'm doing it this way. Now I'm gonna move to a new place and don't even need to be doing film anymore. So whatever. He's a Manny Gen. I made a decision upon moving here that people would only one of the things that was hard in having lost community was what happened was the people who welcomed me into their lives fell in love with evangelical Sophia.
Mhm.
And Sophia, who was willing to people please, and Sophia, who was willing to accommodate you and wear, I call it a lampshade over my light. Okay? And then when I was like, F this, and I took off my lampshade and I was really bright and I was my authentic self and I said the things that I actually believed. And by the way, in my human design, I'm whatever the numbers are, it's like 40, 43, 23. My purpose is I'm supposed to, it literally says, as my purpose, share your thoughts and opinions. Like the world needs my thoughts and opinions. And when I actually started sharing them, they didn't like them. Like it didn't fit with the Sophia they'd met. And so I made a conscious choice. When I moved, I will not dim myself. I will be bright. I will be too much. I've been told my whole life I'm too much, right? I will be all of the muchnesses. That way, whoever meets me will decide they like me in my too muchness. And I have this philosophy I live by. This is in chapter 1 of my book, which is called the 7-2-1 rule, which is out of every 10 people you meet, 7 out of those 10 people are going to be neutral. Like you're just a warm body to them. They don't actually care one way or the other. They have no feelings. 1 person out of every 10 that you meet is not going to like you. It's just not your vibe. It just doesn't work. It's like the magnets, they push against each other. It doesn't work. 2 out of every 10 will love you. So I now move through the world with the belief system that 80% of the people I meet aren't going to jive. But it's my job to go out into the world and find the 20% who's looking for me. And so when I showed up here, I was like, I'm going to be bold and be myself and say the shit that I want to say. And the people who are like, oh my gosh, yes, more of that, they'll find me when I just show up in rooms as a generator, chasing my joy, right? Just go into rooms with my joy, be myself. And the people who are like, oh yes, more of that will find me. And they have, like, it's like magnets. We are drawn to each other. And so I'm only attracting people who like the real version of me.
Mm.
And then everything from there just happens organically. Like they're like, oh my God, have you met this person? Oh, come to this event with me. And I also filled my calendar those first 6 months, even when it was inconvenient, even when I had a laundry list of things to do, even when I had spent all day working on some house project and I had paint on my arms. I would check the events calendar of the local newspaper and Facebook groups. And when I saw something that I thought sounded fun, again, generator chasing her joy. As a generator, I just started chasing my joy. And so I would look at the calendar and be like, oh my God, square dancing in downtown, so fun. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Mahjong, teach me now. And so if I thought it sounded fun, I would go. And I just trusted the process of if I show up in my generator joy, doing things that I think are fun, I'll end up meeting people who also think those things are fun. And so the only people that I'll end up meeting will be the people who like something that I like. And from there, the rest of the community building, it just happened organically. One other thing that's been really helpful, I just made the assumption of I need to do all the inviting because
I've
people,
just come to this fruition as well.
yeah, nobody's making plans. Everybody's waiting to be invited to a thing that nobody's planning. If I want something on my calendar, I have to plan it. I have to initiate, I have to invite. And that's what I do. I don't wait for people to invite me to things. I show up and I make plans and I figure out what I want to do and then I find somebody willing to do it with me.
I love it. I could talk to you forever. I feel like just like hearing your story and just like, on Instagram, a lot of, individuals, you just see like where they're at right now, but you don't see like the journey of how they got to. And I think like even myself, like you can get in your head, like I'm behind, like I need to do, go, go, go. So I just appreciate you sharing like the realness of your journey, and just like most people like have to go through the ups and the downs, and that's how you start to collect your data and figure out like who you really truly are. But then like for you and for I and for everybody, like the real test though is to putting that all into action as well. Like collecting the data is one part of the journey, but putting into action like you've done, like being very intentional about where you're moving and intentional about building your community. Like I just love that you've taken it and just like ran with it and like just showcase like how this can really optimize your life. And you can just tell like how like happy, giddy, true you are just like by talking to you today. So thank you. Thank you. I cannot wait to read your book, but where else can my audience find you?
So for your audience, here are some things that can help you. Based on the things you guys learned about me today, I think that of the different free tools and resources I have, the ones that they would probably most appreciate is something called the Favorite Life Wheel Assessment. And so it's this assessment that will walk you through these 10 areas of life. It teaches you how to like write out what your favorite life looks like in all of those areas. So then you can visualize your altogether favorite life and then also figure out what are your gaps. So like, this is where I want to be. This is where I am. And the power of the word favorite is that you have to define it. What I found, and the reason I wrote my book and the reason I do my life wheel differently, is I found that most people, the biggest problem they had wasn't actually their lives. I can't tell you how many clients have come to me and they, at the end of the day, they changed almost nothing about their life. It turned out that they actually loved the life they were living, or at least like 90% of it. They were punishing themselves because they were comparing themselves to something they should be doing that somebody somewhere else had implanted. And turned out they already had a great body. They just had to love it. They had a great job. They just had to love it. They had a great family. They just had to love it. It was like it was all there, but the stories they were telling themselves weren't serving them. And so the favorite life wheel helps you define what you actually desire, figure out what your real gaps are, and then you can build your favorite life from there. But like that's the first point, is you have to actually define what you desire. And so I'll give you a link so that you can download that assessment and figure out the starting point of their wheel. As far as where you guys can find me, I'm on social media. My handle for almost all the platforms is the Sophia Hyde, because somebody took my name. So the THE is in front of it. And so Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it's all the same, but Instagram is where I actually am showing up. So like if you DM or comment or whatever, like that's the place I primarily am. I have a podcast that ran for 3 years called Your Favorite Self, but I'm currently in the next, follow me on social, because I will be changing to a podcast called Refuse to Choose, as I teach women how to balance motherhood and owning a small business at the same time. And that the refuse to choose is that you do not have to choose between your business, your family, and yourself. So we are ending this martyrdom of putting ourselves last or feeling like you have to take care of everybody else at the expense of yourself. You can choose yourself and still have a thriving business and a thriving family. You don't actually have to pick. You can have all three. And so that'll be the new direction that I'm taking my brand.
I love it. Well, this has been wonderful, Sophia. Thank you so, so much. You have been amazing. And thank you for being so open and honest about your journey. And we will talk again soon.
Okay. Thank you for having me.